Welcome, Facebook, for those of you who are on there, to day 2 of this 5-day challenge. And I, again, am Dr. Alana McLaughlin hosting this challenge for you. And I am excited. I've heard a little bit of feedback from people about looking through their labs. And so I'll go over some of those as well. And I'm curious how it's going with your challenges from yesterday. So the 2 challenges was no sugar. So if you started today, how is that going? And we did this in December. So if you need tips and tricks on different, alternatives to sweeteners or how to curb those cravings, those are in there. And maybe I can comment on them and they'll refresh, I think, in the Facebook world. So there is that. And then the second one is to get outside or create movement preferably outside, but maybe it's just getting movement, or maybe it's just getting outside and doing some grounding. So today I went out and it's felt really warm out, so I did wash my car as part of that being outside, and it was just really nice to get something accomplished as well as being out in the beautiful weather. So I'm curious of what you did today outside movement wise, and I'm hoping to get out for a walk with one of my dogs, or maybe a couple of them after this as well. So welcome to day 2. Let me know how that's going for you. Let me know if one is easier than the other, or if you've decided something else you're doing instead of sugar that you're taking out, because that's also a possibility. And I will say I always feel really good when I take things out, or even just I don't eat a lot of sugar, but I find that there are certain things where it kind of hides in there, and that I just use it almost the first day after. As I'm shifting, I often use it almost like a fast as well. So I didn't do breakfast this morning, and I did my ImmunoCal mid-morning to get in some fuel before I went and taught yoga, and had a great yoga class. I always feel better after some yoga, and amazing students. I love the location where I'm at in Sutton, and it's just a nice refresher. So that's another possibility. And then my oat straw tea, which I've mentioned in prior videos as well. So that one is like getting some of the nourishment I need, but I don't feel hungry. Like my digestion feels good. And that's something for me, and some of you may correlate with this, is that generally when we are eating super clean and not eating in a rush, and things that I am guilty of as well, I just feel so much better. So I hope some of you also are noticing some of those things too. Um, for today, I wanted to recap and kind of go over some of the feedback is as we're looking at labs, and if you have received that functional lab sheet that I have that you can plug in values, I've debated whether to leave the description category on of what that means or what it might. And it's not diagnostic. None of this is diagnostic. It's looking at clues into what's happening in your body. So as we're looking through, as I went through yesterday, and some on Friday too, is there certain categories or different values that we put them together to see what's happening within that system, or an idea of what might be happening and how much we need to pay attention to that. So as we're thinking about that too, then we can put it all together and see how the different systems correlate. So I've gotten some people feedback that once they look at that, their mind goes to the worst of like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with my kidneys and my liver and my da because one value is out of that functional range. And I have to say, no, like, deep breath. It's okay. Like, they're clues, they're pieces to the puzzle that help us understand what's going on. And it's not one thing out of all those labs that's maybe without, outside of that functional range. It's putting together, are there multiple things that correlate with other parts of your labs that tell us or give us some information on where to look or what to look for. So, for example, if the blood sugar is 1 point out of range, I'm not thinking a lot's going on with hormones with that. But if that is there, and then cholesterols are off, and there's a lot going on in the liver, then I'm starting to think, okay, what's happening if I don't have a cortisol, which usually we don't. Then we're also looking at how are you feeling? What kind of stress are you under? And then how do we work around that? Because that's our foundation. So there are more pieces to that. So, like I said, sometimes I've considered taking that off, but I also feel it's really important for you to have more information as you put your lab values in, to kind of start thinking about what those values actually mean, rather than just being a bunch of numbers and whether they're high or low or normal, when there may be other things happening, that we can start putting it together for yourself. And then you come in and meet with somebody or say, hey, I've got several of these though that are out of range in this category, in this category. What do you think might be going on? This is how I feel. So that's why we look at labs. That's why we put it together with your symptoms, how you're feeling, and then being able to take it to the next step. So we are trying to figure out how you feel, what system is not quite right that you're working on shifting, and using that as clues to then dive deeper into what I mentioned yesterday, the 6 M's. And the one that I forgot, I can't believe that I did, is the microbiome. So we've got the microbiome, your the balance within the gut. This can be shifted off when we have things, if we have to take antibiotic, or even just really strong antimicrobial herbs can do this and kill off some of our good bacteria too within our gut. Sometimes we get like gas and bloating in like the midsection of our abdomen. Things don't digest well, like we either have undigested food, or we have like really slow digestion, or really smelly, when we go to the bathroom it's really smelly. Those are all things I'm looking for the microbiome. Sometimes if people have like a lot of like burping, or things settle in the stomach and feel heavy, then I can say, okay, part of the digestion we need to optimize. Maybe it's the enzymes, maybe it's stress, maybe it is hydrochloric acid not breaking things down. So each of those then will break down and figure out where do we support first, that's impacting that microbiome, and then build it back up. Sometimes we can do it just through fermented foods. Sometimes it's more like a soil-based probiotic. And looking at the types of foods and fiber and stress levels and how we're eating. So that's how I would break down one of those 6M categories. Another one in there is methylation. So I've mentioned this quite a few times, and this comes up quite a bit, and I'm watching for comments as well. This one we can start to see on our labs somewhat too, under our red blood cell count that I've mentioned, depending on where those values are at for the size and shape of our red blood cells, can give us an indicator of whether we are able to methylate well. Of course, like if you really want to know like what the genetic expression is, then there are tests I use. I use one as well, the nutrigenomics, and it's a kit, super easy, that you get and you do it from home, but then it'll give you kind of the health factors and looking at some of the genetics behind it, of whether you have one gene working well or both genes, or whether there's a defect in one or both, and how well you do things like methylation. The genetic report, some of those also look at other components within our genetic makeup that have a susceptibility to more, maybe it's anxiousness or low mood or fluctuation. Some of them will have an impact on whether we tend to gain weight more easily, or whether we're going to have an easier time keeping a lean build. That also goes to the microbiome too, of what we put in for the bacteria in there can also shift kind of our body composition makeup. So they're interrelated as well. Going into that. But that's where I would bring in some genetics if we aren't sure and we want to figure it out, is pulling just that easy genetic that's very affordable now to be able to move forward. Methylation also shows up in how well we use our hormones and convert hormones, and then what happens to those byproducts as we break things down. So, and then tying it back into the labs, the homocysteine is a factor I've mentioned before. I don't think I mentioned it on Friday, but I have mentioned it before. If we're seeing an elevated homocysteine, I'm also wondering about methylation and how well your body methylates. And if you're taking vitamins that are not methylated form, that can be creating an elevated homocysteine within the body because of how our body is not able to process like it should be able to those vitamins. So the next one on there, going through mucosal barriers. This one can relate to the microbiome somewhat, but this is also with maybe experiencing things where you get a lot of like burning in the mouth or throat or sores inside your mouth. If there's sores in your mouth, our mucosal barrier is all one tract, through our digestive system. So if they're in the mouth, you also likely have irritation within the small intestine or other places along that tract. So we're looking at how do we heal that and why do we have that happening? Sometimes it might be like getting, the reflux. Is it things aren't breaking down? Is there hiatal hernia, which is a structural component? And then if it's further down, do we have foods that are irritating that membrane that is a single layer epithelial cell, just like our skin is, and the respiratory lining of like our lungs? Um, it's all the same type of cell tissue. And so we have to look and see, are there other things going on relating to not just the mucosal barrier, but just that type of cell in general across our body? Um, and the other one, the next one, a big one that I talk about a lot is our mitochondria. So I'm going through these 6 M's to give an idea of what that might look like in our body. Mitochondria, the big one I think of is energy. Another one with it is autoimmunity, when our body is not balancing our immune system well. This can really impact our mitochondrial function. Stress is another big one. Electromagnetic frequencies or EMFs is a big one that impacts our mitochondria. And this might look like just sluggishness or just like all day feeling kind of tired. You never really get a big surge. And you probably know somebody like this, that they always just feel like trudging through, nothing extra. And it can be really, really hard to be in that space. Like they go from maybe work to the couch to watch TV and maybe eating dinner on the couch. Sometimes there is like a next level of a little bit of energy in there, but a lot of times that's like the extreme picture. But in more so, it just might be that we just don't feel like we have the extra energy to do what we want to be able to do. So, mitochondria, the energy cells, the powerhouse of our cell, and they go from defense mode into energy mode. And in defense mode, we don't get the energy out of them. So, it's a lot harder to create energy for what we want to do. And there are so many great ways to support that. Um, Even managing our stress, doing breathing exercises, doing things like yoga or restorative yoga, walking outside instead of trying to do like a vigorous run or something that we're really pushing our body. Generally, we don't want to do that form of movement. We want something more restorative so that our mitochondria and our systems can catch up. So that's an easy tip. With one level I look at with mitochondria is generally there's a cortisol impact as well in there, and supporting by kind of the phrase of less is more sometimes, and mitochondrial, when they're struggling, less is definitely more. um, Sleep is a big one with that too. And the next is looking at the membranes of our cell. So correlating to labs, when I'm thinking about that, is on your labs. The easiest place I feel to see it is showing up in iron. If you have an iron panel and the total iron binding capacity with our iron compared to our ferritin. So ferritin is how we store iron in the body. And again, I mentioned this on Friday, I believe, if not prior, that this one most often it would be in women or in some way where we have lost a lot of blood. And it can be through like restoring after a severe injury, things like that. And if there is low ferritin and there hasn't been something where we're losing blood, then trying to figure out why is our body not converting or storing iron well. Sometimes you have an elevated or plenty of iron or more, and so we have to figure out if that TIBC, that total iron binding capacity, is also high, then it is in there, but our body's not using it properly. Our body is, and it might be damaging our body in that case. So this comes down to membranes of the cells and wondering, do we need to do like a cellular cleanse? Do we have these cells that are not functioning like they should be? And then we can clear out those cells that are taking our energy, and then we have more energy to put into our healthy cells. The next one on there is minerals. And minerals is huge because how many of you, and you can put in the comments, have heard of cofactors? So for so many of our biological pathways, actually every pathway, I'm pretty sure I can say every in this case, they have cofactors of minerals, and our cells have different minerals for allowing what comes in and what goes out of a cell. We need minerals for how we absorb things, what we get rid of. The magnesium, for example, allows for this. It's calming, so it helps with our mind, it helps with our muscles, it helps with our digestion. And we often don't get as many of our minerals nowadays through the food we eat because the soil is not as nutrient dense as it used to be. There's a depletion factor happening unless there's a really, a true restoration of that soil, a turnover, a changing of crops, adding those minerals back in through compost and things. Then we're more likely to be getting more nutrients out of our food, which is also support for growing your own food if you can, or having a trusted farmer, or maybe like a CSA that you get to participate in where you know that your food is going to be more nutrient dense. And then also, are you chewing thoroughly? Is your digestion good to get all the minerals out of that we need? If the answer is no, then I say there's definitely a benefit a lot of times to taking in either minerals through like a Himalayan, I've been told lately, like Himalayan sea salts, there's some cautions around that. But through sources that are more complete and or a clean like electrolyte support, coconut water is a great one that has kind of natural, and when it comes from nature like that, it's balanced really well so that it's going to have, this balance of minerals together, and our body knows what to do with that. So sometimes we'd be careful with some of the ones that are manufactured of the right ratios and things like that. But more and more companies are doing drinks and, energy, not necessarily energy drinks, but it's going to give you energy because your body then has what it needs to build what it needs to from there. And that's essentially what most of this is about, is giving your body what it needs so that then it can go through the processes that it needs to be more energized, to be healthier, to be, more vibrant, to feel better. And that was the last of my 6Ms, but I wanted to talk on that too. Another one that, as we're looking through this and depending on what systems are out, is truly healing or giving the body what it needs. And glutathione is one I've mentioned before, because it is this master antioxidant that allows all of the other antioxidants to recycle better. And if we are depleted, which we, like so many other things, as we age, we tend to not convert. We don't have the ability to use it and produce it as much as we used to when we were younger. So we generally will say, as we age, there's a decline in the glutathione and generally an increase in other health things that come up. The same I've seen for many other factors, but I know glutathione is one of those where there is that correlation. So I'm a big proponent of that, and I've definitely been using that more often as a benefit of how to give the body a building block that then you don't have to know exactly everything else going on, but we give it that building block, that foundation, so then our body can do what it needs to do with it. If that resonates with you, I'd love to hear. And I know some of you on here that are tracking are also doing some with glutathione. And as we're looking through some of these factors, the other part that I would say on this is how to put it into action. So what we're taking is only part of it. And that's part of why the challenge I started with nutrition and our movement, because really that plays a huge role. And when we're doing both of those things, we're gauging or having a mindfulness about what we're putting into our body and how we're moving our bodies every day to whatever ability we're able to. Then we are able to see a difference in our rhythms, in our hormones, which affects our sleep cycle, which then affects our energy. So the point is to keep it in balance and do what we can day to day to support ourselves in as much as we can. And I know this is difficult, and I'm saying this because coming out of a cycle of a lot of busyness and kids and family, and out of, ours is this hockey season, is feeling like it's amazing the difference. I mentioned it yesterday, the difference in just having a little more time to do the spring cleaning, to wash the car, to hang up racks, to clear out clothes, to organize and sort and clear out toys. And it's been a project that every couple of weeks I've been trying to get something like that accomplished. And it feels really nice to be able to look around different spaces, and you walk into a space and it's still like everything feels like it's still clean and organized. And there's still a lot of space to do that too in my home, but I hope all of you can relate to this. So finding those little things that, like, you just notice as I'm looking in the room I'm in, there's still like surfaces that tend to collect things, but then every time you see that surface, like, you see all that stuff. And it's like, do you shut down, or can you like be like, okay, can I take 2 hours and get like one surface cleaned? And then the rest of the week you get to see that surface clear and be able to carry on with it. So I'm not seeing any questions coming in so far. And so that is the main point I wanted to cover today. And I'm excited to announce that as you're moving through this and putting this all together for you, looking at your labs, please reach out if you want me to help you go through your labs, to get you that functional lab sheet and to be able to go through that and put together those systems. And Thursday, it looks like I'm going to be able to have a special guest. So you're not going to want to miss this, on regenerative health. So it's another way of looking at how do we take this body with everything that comes at us from every day, and start, a lot of people now are talking about aging backwards, and how do we lengthen those telomeres on our genes so that we live longer. And it's something that I think catches our attention, that while we're living, we don't just want to live and be here. We don't want to age, right? We want to actually have a health span where we get to be healthy and active and happy and enjoy things, and take in the beautiful mountains. Like, the sunrise this morning was incredible. I was driving, so I didn't get a picture, but beautiful pink skies coming up over the mountains. And I would say that's another part to add in this week during the 5-day challenge is, do you notice something every day where you can stop, and as you're driving or as you're doing whatever, where you actually appreciate and show that gratitude for all that we have? So thank you for joining me, and let me sign off on here. I'm going to check really quick to see if there is any comments on here that I can see, and I am not right away. So I will end there for today, and I hope to see you tomorrow, where we will go a deeper dive into what we can do from there, and then guest speaker on our guest, coming in on Thursday, and then we'll tidy it up on Friday. So take care, and we'll catch you tomorrow.